Welcome to the MMA Roadshow, episode number 194. And I gotta say, 194 might be just my new favorite episode, and we're just getting started. My name is John Morgan. My man Cole Coffee is in the building, but he is deep in the edit right now. He will join us a little bit later right now as he finishes up some of his video responsibilities. Instead, I got my man here, Dan Tom, native Hawaiian, right? No better place to be than in your old school backyard right here. We are in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're sitting in my hotel room right now. The door is open. It is December 13th, and it is 76 degrees out there.
You know what I got to say to that, John?
Let's hear it. Oh, yeah, just popping open frosty beverages, sitting down for the MMA Roadshow. This is beautiful, man. I mean, I sent a picture out earlier this week. I don't quite have the ocean view, but I got a little jungle canopy view right here. And if you peek through the trees a little bit, you can see the ocean. But nevertheless, I will not complain because it is gorgeous out here. The flip side of this, if I hadn't been here, would have been in Milwaukee, which is freezing cold. No disrespect to Milwaukee. It's a fine place that makes fine frosty beverages. But I am happy to be here for dual Bellator events, Bellator 212, Bellator 213. And how you feeling, man? It's the return of big-time MMA 10 years away. Finally got big-time MMA back in Hawaii.
We do, man, and we're actually here for it. I mean, it's safe to say we didn't know each other at the time, but
right.
I was touring in a van in the United States in some type of band or some sort, kind of casually following the sport. I actually wasn't in my stomping grounds here at home in Hawaii, to be honest, during that time.
Really?
And I take it you were obviously an avid fan then, but obviously not covering those events at that time.
We weren't traveling back then, so I didn't get to come out here.
Okay.
At that point, I hadn't quite made it to Vegas. I don't think we ever really traveled that much for Show XC events, which I think were the ones that came out here were the smaller ones. I think mostly were the Show XCs. We didn't travel out here that much. I think we really started traveling big time when USA Today bought us in 2011. Okay. I think 2010, 2011 is when we really hit the road and we're going to travel to like everything. So yeah, never was covering it on TV. Was covering it, but yeah, I have not been to Hawaii since. I was 7 years old. I sent out a picture earlier this week.
Right.
I know some people got a kick out of that, man. Yeah, I've been here one time when I was 7 years old, and it's good to be back, man. And I'm excited for this weekend.
Shoot, that was 1985. That photo was dated, folks. So you could see a young Dan Tom being birthed in the background of that photo. Fun fact.
33 years ago, man. Where does the time go? All right, we'll get to Bellator in just a second. I did want to just throw out real quick. Didn't get to do an and a half episode last week because it was like 5:30 in the morning by the time I finished working. Don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's been, quite a few days since then. But I did just have to say, masterful performance by Max Holloway in the main event up there in Toronto. I was working in the back all night. I was the video guy last week. Mike Bond was working out front, but once we were doing the scrums in the backstage area, and then we moved our cameras to the press conference riser and kind of reset everything. And once I got everything in place and all my equipment was secure, I watched the first two rounds on the monitor, and then I was actually able to run out for rounds 3 and rounds 4, which was great because the UFC held me a seat up there, and really to soak it in, man, just to soak in the atmosphere. I was thrilled about that fight going in. I'm a huge fan of both those guys, and I really think they're incredibly high-level fighters. But I really just wanted to get out there and get a feel for the crowd and the energy. And I got to say, I know that fight wasn't necessarily getting the love that I think I thought it deserved in terms of really being like two of the best in the sport, like 2 pound-for-pound guys right now. But it had big energy, man. And that third round was when Brian Ortega started mounting a comeback. It was a brief comeback.
Right.
The tide started turning, and then Holloway, of course, turned it back on in the fourth. But, man, I don't know how it translated on TV, but to me in that building, I was happy to see. It had a real big-time feel.
It did to us too, and again, I don't want to get too much in the minutia or the arguments, so to speak, if you want to call them that came after it, but I think we can all agree that it was one of those performances that inspire that kind of talk, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of translating, you actually answered my question. I was going to actually ask you how that third round translated, because that was one of the contentious points of how people were seeing it, the way the commentary was calling it. Obviously, you're not privy to the commentary call.
Yeah, I didn't hear the commentary. No, was it? I did hear. Well, there was some criticism afterwards that people thought it was a really one-sided commentary. Was that right?
Yeah, and also it came off the tails of Shevchenko-Jędrzejczyk, which will also receive that criticism, where most people, including myself, scored it 5-0.
Right.
Shevchenko, there was a kind of an inactive round that if you really wanted to be kind, maybe, I don't know.
I think in the back, as we were kind of scoring it back there, we had it 4-1.
Okay, yeah.
I wouldn't hate 5-0.
But I think it was the way it was called, and I just will say something as a defense, and I want to get your side on this, because this is what it comes down to for me. Now we can pick at a commentator or a fight or a card in this case all we want, and there's a lot of examples of these, but it's something that I think we actually deal with kind of, though we're not calling, and you've called fights before actually,
right,
John, so you can speak on this more. But there's this thing where when you're previewing the fight, and at least for me, I have to break down fights, I have to try to be unbiased, I have to try to come with the facts as correct as I can. And if you come off and come biased on one way, people will call you out on that, and rightfully so. But I will argue, when you're previewing an event, you do have to be fair to both. You have to state the facts, even if it's an odd smash match. You can't just go in there and be like, yeah, this person's probably just going to smash that person. And that's not much of a preview. You know what I'm saying? And I think the commentators, they're put in this kind of funny position, whether they cut to them to kill time, they kind of go to preview mode, but then they have to turn right around and be critical and analytical. And I think in their defense, I think that those roles get crossed a bit.
It can get a little tough, and kind of what kind of information you're giving, and not realizing that maybe it does seem incredibly one-sided. It's a tough job. I know everybody thinks they can do it. It's been a long time since I do it. Maybe doing it again very soon. I'll throw a little teaser out there and working on some things behind the scenes, but maybe getting back to that in 2019, which I'm excited about. But it is a tougher job, and I think most people realize. And I think too. I think what happens sometimes is, you see tendencies in a fight that you didn't expect to see, or, maybe people are fighting a different way than what you thought you would, and maybe you give too much credit to that or too little credit to another thing. And I think that can definitely be a danger. But anyway, all that aside, amazing performance by Max Holloway. I was very, very impressed. I was kind of interested to see, obviously your partner at MMAjunkie Radio, Gorgeous George. He kind of handles he's the rankings head. He kind of throws out all the recommendations, and then myself and the other editors, we kind of review them and we say, well, no, let's tweak this. I don't like this. Let's do that. But we ultimately left Ortega at number 2, and okay. I thought that was fair. To be honest with you, I know it was it was a fairly one-sided performance. As gutsy as Brian Ortega was, it was fairly one-sided, and we ended up leaving him at number 2. And honestly, I feel comfortable with that, and I think these guys are going to fight again. It's interesting. I did hear, and I almost hesitate to even say anything right now, because I don't know that he would even want it out there. But I was told from some people behind the scenes that Ortega was sick all week long and was dealing with some issues.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I don't want to make excuse, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a T-City homer, dude. I love Ortega, but I don't want to take away from Holloway, because even if he was, dude, Holloway to me just looked on point. But you hate to think that if there was something ailing Ortega, that it was that week, that night. That's out. But then again, if something pops off in the street, nobody cares if you're bro, I would go at you tonight, but I'm a little under the weather,
One thing's for sure, though, even if he was sick, it just makes it that much more impressive and that much more of a harder out. If I'm a fighter that has to sign the contract to fight that guy, you're not getting an easy night. I don't care how high-ranked you are.
No doubt about it. I was, like I said, working in the back all night. There were some kind of some funny moments back behind the scenes. Of course, we put out all the content, put out all the scrums, that sort of thing. But there was a moment that had to be shared, because I don't know how it happened, and I'm going to have to get him to clarify this at some point. But at some point in the night, Diego Ferreira comes back to do his post-fight interview, and he sits down. And right before we get started, he looks on the ground. He says, "Can you hand me my cup?" And I thought maybe he meant like a glass of water or something along those lines. But no, his cup was on the ground, and Oscar from the Mac Life, our good friend Oscar from the Mac Life, was a man about it and just reached down and picked up the cup and handed it to him. So props to Oscar for not being, ooh, it's a cup. I'll give him credit there. I don't know if it was the game used cup or maybe a backup cup that just happened to fall out of a bag. I don't know how it got there. But I just wanted to give props to Oscar from the Mac Life for being willing to just throw down and grab a cup and like a real man.
Especially if Diego Ferreira inserts his cup the way I and many other gentlemen do, then massive props to Oscar in that case.
Oh man, too good. They're like buddies now, I guess. You know what I mean? Like you're good for that's like your best friend now. I think that's how it works out. It was funny too. All week long I'm not gonna lie. I was wearing shorts. I do.
Savage. I know you were going to go through with it. You did.
I did. I'm gonna wear shorts, and I'll be honest with you. I probably have pants, but it's kind of I don't really know if I own pants anymore. To be honest, I'm not sure. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision as much as just habit. And in fairness, I was only outside of buildings for a total of about like 7 minutes the entire week. Because, you're just going, you're jumping out of a car, going into here, jumping out of a car, going there. But I won't lie, I was freezing cold. Those 7 minutes that I was freezing. But it worked out in the end because the post-fight press conference, we were working in the back, kind of a small room, and it was okay when it was just the videographers and the writers back there. But then all the people that were at press row came back as well post-fight because obviously there's nothing out there. And on top of that, there were these huge overhead lights to light up the press conference stage. They threw those on, and it got so hot in there. I mean, like to the point you're literally just wiping sweat off your brow.
Oh, wow.
So hot in there, and it's funny because Neil Davidson from the Canadian Press, who's a great guy, used to see a lot more of him, used to travel a lot more, but he's like all of us, his travel budget has been cut as well, so he stays home a lot more, but he's a good dude, and he turns to me and he's like, turns out you were right to wear the shorts because, everybody's in there sweating their ass off, and I was wearing shorts, and I was like, yeah, all week long you guys all made fun of me. Who's crazy like a fox now?
Almost opposite of today, huh? The press conference room today.
Freezing in there today. God, it was super cold. Alima Lay McFarland just shivering up there. One last note from last week. I did see and I'm sure you probably saw it too. I didn't catch it the first time, but then somebody showed it to me. That they kind of teased like for December 29th, and it was like a real kind of mysterious promo.
Yeah.
It is a new championship belt. There's new championship belts coming. So I think I'm expecting an announcement, but I've heard behind the scenes that yes, new UFC belts are coming. A redesign of the UFC belt is coming, and I'm assuming since they put 12/29 on it, that's when they're going to roll it out. Is going to be on December 29th. So we get an update of the UFC belt. Now, what I'm curious to see is like if you look at it. So knowing what it is, knowing it's a UFC belt, knowing it's a new UFC belt, and not new in that like there's going to be one. I think my understanding is all the belts will be updated, basically. Cool. So not like this is some like intercontinental or universal title or something like that. Yeah. But you notice there were like flags on it, and that's the interesting part. That's the part that I'm not so sure about. My guess is, well, I got two guesses. Right. One is, but see, I think this would be they'd have to make them too many times. Either one, it's going to have all the countries of the champions. You know what I mean? Right. But then I guess you'd have to make them over and over all the time. My other guess is that it would represent like the champions of that weight class. Like if you have the flyweight belt, I guess the flyweight belt would basically just have an American flag and an American flag on it. You know what I mean? Like one representing Mighty Mouse and one representing Henry Cejudo. But that the welterweight would have the Canadian for GSP, and you know what I mean? That it would move around like that. So. That's my guess. It's something along those lines. But I do know they're rolling out a new championship belt, which is cool.
All right. No, because when I saw that, I thought for one, I was with everybody else, and I thought, are they hinting at a matchup, and you're trying to decode which flags mean what? And I saw some people throwing, was the Canadian flag maybe Brock Lesnar because he represents Canada? And then they started getting off the hand, right? With tinfoil theories.
Canada.
Yeah, right. Right.
So
I know, it's so random. So they started getting a bit out of hand. But more along the lines of your thoughts, what I thought, John, is like kind of like when you look at Tapology, the record, it shows the record of the guy at the time and who they were at the time.
Right.
I wonder if that's what they're going to do because if you get a new belt each time, and then depending on what champion you ask, there's a little different story there. But maybe if you're American and you beat a Canadian, or the Canadian was a sitting champ, it represents that. So it shows a lineage of crossover and path, and a little history, a little personalization.
That'd be cool too. Yeah. I'm anxious to see it. I'm guessing they'll make. I guess they'll make an announcement on Fight Week. Just if you're looking ahead to UFC 232, if you're looking ahead to it, my understanding is because obviously it's the week of Christmas and that kind of messes with things. But my understanding of what they're going to do that week is Fight Week activities basically won't start till Thursday, so it's going to be a short week of media. Because they don't want to start it. They don't want to start it the day after Christmas because they want to give people time to travel and time to get in, all that. So really, it sounds like all the media stuff is going to be on Thursday, and then of course weigh-ins Friday, fight Saturday.
Whoa.
So
wow,
it's going to be a very, very compact fight week. I'm sure they'll have like some media tours and stuff next week to kind of line those out. But Anyway, I said that was my last note. Let me give you one other last note.
Hit me.
I sit next to the. All right, I don't want to say the craziest guy. I don't want to say that. But I took a picture, and it is on my Instagram as well. Which, by the way, I'm thinking. I don't know. Like, I think I'm gonna switch to Instagram. It seems like more people are using Instagram these days than Twitter. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I took a picture, and it was a guy sitting next to me on the window seat with an animal in his lap with two very big pointy ears, and it looked like a big dog, basically. And when I took the picture, people thought it was a real dog. They asked me what kind of dog it was. But it wasn't actually a real dog. It was a stuffed animal. It was a stuffed animal, and okay, I mean, it's a grown man with a stuffed animal, but could be a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
could be something for someone else, or maybe it's just carrying it. But no, not only was it definitely clearly not anybody else's, but I'm pretty sure it was an emotional support stuffed animal.
So it wasn't like Bruce Willis in Die Hard bringing the big bear for his daughter.
No, the guy was like talking to it.
Jeez.
and rubbing the chin and petting it and kind of giving it a little squeeze, a little rub up against it on the way out. So it was weird. I actually, it was funny. My mom asked me about it. She's like, "What was that about?" She's like, "What was talking to him like?" I'm like, "Talking to him? I put my headphones on quick. Like, I don't want to get in a conversation with the guy with the emotional support stuffed animal." So be on the lookout for that. Apparently, every now and then he travels between Toronto and Chicago, or at least that day he did. So bizarre.
No, I love those travel stories, man, and I won't get into it here, but I had a couple myself that are really reminiscent that listeners of this podcast can appreciate. I'm sure they have their own stories, too, to know you're not just embellishing these things. These are just funny stories from the road, man. I mean, with the way we police whether the employees in the air or the people, like you noted, that fly in the air. It's a funny scene.
It's crazy, man. It was unique. I'll say that. All right. All right. Well, listen. Enough about Toronto. Enough about all that. Let's talk about Hawaii. It is cool to see Bellator back here. It's cool to see, or here I should say, bringing MMA back here. I mean, it's been starved for a long time, man. You think of BJ Penn announcing and begging, to bring the UFC back. Of course, Max Holloway, as of late, has been saying, let's get the UFC to Hawaii. And I gotta think, man, on that role that he's on right now, man, maybe they want to get things going and get out here. But give me an idea what it means to the community. I mean, I know you live in Vegas now, but you still have some roots here. This is, it seems to me, a very fight-friendly community. And if you're a newer listener, a newer fan of the sport, I mean, you might not realize there's old school roots there.
Yeah.
You had Rumble on the Rock way back in the day. You had Super Brawl way back in the day. I saw TJ Thompson was actually walking around there today. He's the old promoter. He was actually there in the building. I think he actually talked to Gareth A. Davies for quite some time to kind of give him a history of it. But granted, we've only been here a couple of days, and of course we've been in hotels more or less. But man, the community we've met and the people that we've seen, this is a fight community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said it. We're going to, I think, hear a lot of that. Rumble on the Rock, Super Brawl, Show XC, all these things. A lot of us hardcore is reminiscent, or even if you weren't watching at the time, you've looked at guys' records, whether it was a BJ Penn or even Roger Huerta. You'd be surprised the guys that have roots out here in Hawaii.
Right.
Dating back to guys like Tim Sylvia or Vitor. The Super Brawl shows. There's obviously that there for MMA, and it's huge for all those reasons that we can get into that. But one thing I thought was really cool, and I was talking to Rich Chu about this a bit after the presser today about the history of combat, and it sounds really kind of contrite, like, oh, it's fighting is a part of our culture, and you hear that with Hawaiians say that, but you also hear that with what is the other hotbed? There's many hotbed of fighters culturally and from different parts of the world, but obviously Dagestan is one of them.
Yeah,
and what's the history there that we've learned with the rise of Khabib Nurmagomedov? The history of war and what that makes, and kind of like Gareth A. Davies pointed out about the Hawaiian flag, how it has the British flag on there for people that don't know. It was under a bit of that rule, and Hawaii even became a state. It's the 50th state, and it didn't happen in the most kindest ways, guys. I mean, our queen was held at gunpoint and forced to sign a treaty while our people were being slaughtered. This wasn't that long ago. So there's this really...
I'm not going to lie, I didn't know that.
No, I mean, so this is really...
That was to bring it into statehood?
Yeah. They actually made a movie about it that was actually somewhat... It didn't pull too many punches. It didn't make it very big, but I think it's called. It was about our queen. I forget what they named it to the title.
Right.
But yeah, it's worth a check out there. The American-made film made in the last 10 years or so, U.S. made. But the point is, there was a lot of battle. Inter island battles. I mean, Hawaii is just a big mixing bowl. If you go to the restaurants out here, they're all mixed for a reason. We have Koreans, Chinese, Polynesian, and as beautiful as that is, and the great to have all those availabilities of food, you don't mix in cultures without some historical.
People don't just all pat each other on the back.
Yeah,
and
they
say,
don't.
Nice to
Hey,
meet you,
welcome.
buddy."
Hey, you can post up right here. Sure, why not? So it is. There is this other kind of deep cultural history, and yeah, even like I was talking with Rich, like the traditional martial arts background too. You got Ed Parker in the Hawaiian Kempo series, and how that spawned to guys like John Hackleman, and we know what John Hackleman ended up contributing to the sport through his lineage. So there's all these weird connections, and these old school, even like before MMA, traditional martial arts guys. Some of my uncles took part of it. Andrew Lum in the Kung Fu scene, and some of these other names. They would go down to the actual harbors where the American sailors were, and this and that, and that's how they would test out their martial arts and whatnot too. A lot of the times. I mean, so it's crazy. Even within the quote unquote traditional martial arts, it was a bit more combative and violent, let's say. So yeah, all these historical pinpoints. A bit of a long answer there, but yeah, it all kind of boils over into why we have a fighting culture. Why it's not so crazy. We have from a BJ Penn to an Alima Lay McFarland.
Right. It's funny. So you mentioned Alima Lay McFarland. I guess we'll just get into it. I mean, there's two cards, and you can kind of talk about it. It's almost like it's one event together. The way we're kind of treating everything this week. I mean, and when you combine the two, they're really really good. And of course, Valerie Letourneau is the challenger for the women's flyweight title against champ Alima Lay McFarland. That wraps up Saturday night, Bellator 213. And when we were doing the media day, which was outside, which was beautiful, the open workouts and everything, getting it to go outside and enjoy the scenery and the weather. But it was funny because she had some comments, because I just asked her, what's a Hawaiian fight culture going to be like? What's the atmosphere going to be like? What's the crowd going to be like? And I think she was being a little bit tongue in cheek, but also very seriously. She said, "Listen, the main thing is I'm just hoping that everybody keeps it together." That she joked about her own friends that my pre-party starts at noon. I think her fight's around like 6 or something like that. She's like, hopefully people aren't too drunk.
Yeah.
But she said, listen, people like to fight, and not only people like their fighters, they like to fight. And I had heard this coming in, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I had heard that there are some inter-Hawaiian matchups on this card, the prelims especially, and that's what Bellator always does. They book local talent on their prelims. But I had heard that there were some inter-Hawaiian matchups where it could get a little bit dicey, in terms of the tension and the rivalry, and we saw it today with the face-offs. Nainoa Dung and Kona Oliveira, a 19-year-old kid and a 20-year-old kid, which is awesome to see these young guys getting this opportunity. But man, they were going at it. I mean, first it started with a little bit of jabbering at the press conference, and then when they did the face-offs, Nainoa did the
cocking of a gun.
Of a gun. Yeah, they were doing a face-off, and the video's up on MMAjunkie if you want to see it. But they did a traditional face-off, and then he stepped back and basically acted like he had a rifle in his face, and Coker kind of was like, "What the hell?" and stood back and then started. But and then from that point, on both sides of the room, the camp started yelling at each other. They're yelling. The coaches yelling at each other. We'll see. Da 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 da. And Renzo Gracie was over there trying to calm it down, and they just kept going and kept going. And then the next matchup was King Mo and Liam McGeary, and they get up on stage, and the camps for Dung and Oliveira are still going at it. And King Mo actually at one point was like, "Hey guys, give it a break. It's our turn to do a face-off." So I don't know. I mean, talk to me about that. I mean. Do we need to worry a little bit about our safety on fight night, or is that being too much? Because at first I was worried that like what Alima was saying wasn't going to be taken well, because she was like, "Listen, I hope my people don't riot because we want them to keep coming back." And I was like, "Oh man," in my head I was like, "Oh man, I hope people don't take that the wrong way what she was saying." And now I see that I think she was just being pretty honest.
She was spot on. Yeah, you're right, John. They didn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. I mean, I already agreed with her when she was saying it, just because I had those memories of, again, harkening back to the Rumble on the Rock. I mean, I one of the DVDs was Rodrigo Gracie when he was fighting BJ Penn, and it's a Gracie versus Penn, and yet the camera, which I'm sure Bellator is not going to do this, thankfully, but they start going away from the fight into the crowd, not just once, multiple times. If you guys go and buy that DVD or go back and watch it, and because just the fights were getting so out of hand, and yeah, like you said, they didn't miss a beat as soon as the gun cocking thing happened. And I don't know if you caught this too. I caught it on the rewatch. And for folks, you can go watch the video because the audio picks up perfectly what John's explaining. But after when they're stepping down, it looks like Nainoa kind of does a slip. He like almost slips and misses a step. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't
and
see
then
that.
One of the other corners goes, "You see that? You see that?" And you can hear him on the thing on the audio going, "You see that? You see?" And then then that's when this guy over here really started getting fired up.
Wow.
And it almost was. I thought it was the gun cocking, but it almost looked like the slip. And they're just making fun of him because like, oh, he just did the gun cocking thing, and the same guy slips.
Right.
And so yeah, that's all the fuel they needed, and the corners wanted to fight more than the guys.
I think the corners did want to go at it.
They're missing the Super Bowl days more than us, eh?
I'm telling you, man. So I'm excited to see now. To be clear, Friday night is the fight for the troops. Now there will be friends and family there, so people of the fighters that wanted tickets got tickets, but everybody else is from the troops. I did learn this week too, and Scott said this. You may or may not know this, but Scott Coker, I should say, said this is the only place outside Washington D.C. where all 5 branches of the military are represented in one place. I didn't know that. So makes sense. I mean, very strategic area, that sort of thing. But anyway, so the military will be there on Friday night. So I'm sure that'll be a good environment, but probably not quite the battles and the wars that we're expecting. But Saturday night, that's where the heat's going to be. So I'm anxious to see because it'll be 2 totally different crowds on the 2 nights. And I've never been in the Blaisdell Center before. I'm told it's small, old, not a lot to it. Space is going to be packed tight, but it should be a good atmosphere.
Yeah. What did Coker say? What did the word he say? Structural limitations or
structural limitations? I think it was a very nice way to say it. It's an old crappy building.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Friday night. Brent Primus versus Michael Chandler. Took a long time for this fight to happen. If you remember, Brent Primus, of course, won the title a year and a half ago. He had those low calf kicks. This is the fight that kind of introduced those to the world, right? Where everybody started saying, "Oh my gosh, that's a dangerous weapon." Took out Michael Chandler with those kicks. Michael Chandler, of course, the poster boy for Bellator, all kinds of records in the organization for how busy he is, and these guys are both really talented fighters. Chandler was very frustrated and remains frustrated to this day. He says, "Listen, I could have fought." It is interesting. You remember when you go back and watch that, he couldn't support himself, but you also had the added thing of the commission pulling the stool out. Remember that? They pulled the stool out from under. He goes to sit down thinking the stool is still there, and it's gone. So that made it look even worse. But he said, I was okay. Like I was getting, I was regaining composure. And, as you mentioned, we saw Henry Cejudo do that, right? We saw Henry Cejudo succumb to an injury like that and then battle his way through it against Demetrius Johnson to come back. So I'm intrigued by this fight, man. I know you spend a lot more time, watching tape and going back and revisiting than I do. So I wanted to kind of get your take on it because the narrative around this that Michael Chandler has been pushing, of course, and that Michael Chandler fans have been pushing is that the Primus win was a fluke. Plain and simple, it was a fluke. It was a weird thing, got hit by a weird kick. And yet, Primus says, listen, no, I threw those with intent, number one. So, A, it's not a fluke. It's like somebody saying a lucky punch. It's like, well, if I was throwing it at his shin trying to knock him out, how lucky is it? So, he says it's not a fluke, and not only that, it's not like that was the first fight I've ever had, the only fight I've ever had. I earned my way to that spot. So, break this down. What do you see? I mean, is Chandler the better fighter that just got beat that night, or is Primus maybe deserve a little bit more respect than he gets?
I think both those things are right. I think Chandler is the better fighter, and he did just get beat that. And I don't think you should take away credit, lending to your second point, John, as far as Brent Primus, because he did land the kick. If you go back and watch the footage, you'll see it lands almost kind of like a regular. The one that actually got the reaction from Chandler lands almost like a normal leg kick, but it clearly gets a reaction, and we see what happens. And it was upsetting because the commission really is at fault. I know the fighters are blaming each other, and that kind of has taken over the narrative, but really it's the commission's fault. They stepped in. It was I don't want to pick on Todd Anderson, but New York Commission and Todd Anderson in particular have been tied to multiple questionable calls and at times, and that was definitely one of them. And I'm not trying to come at Todd Anderson is a respectful martial artist, works hard at his craft and all that, but I mean it was not the right call. Like you said, we saw it play out in the Cejudo Demetrius Johnson, but more importantly, I believe it was a UFC Mexico show. We saw 2 fights in one night. I want to say it was Alejandro Perez versus Scott Jorgensen, and he was kicking Scott Jorgensen's legs out, and it was really ugly for a round, but they let the fight play out. And later that night we saw Diego Sanchez do his 145 debut. Thank goodness he only did that once against Ricardo Lamas. And the same thing, he was getting those low calf kicks, and it looked uncomfortable, especially with the amount of damage we know Diego took. But they let the fight play out like it was supposed to, and that was not allowed to happen. So that's the unfortunate part, because it hurt Primus most of all, and Primus just has a weird sample size. I was talking to Big John about this today after one of the weigh-ins, and it's he's only fought once every year since 2013. And he's just got the weirdest sample size. And he looks really mechanical on the feet, but people underestimate him on the ground. Primus, I don't know how he makes 155. He's
a big dude.
He's a big dude, but those muscles aren't for show. Like, if you watch him work on the ground, he is super flexible. Like, he can get his shin all the way up to his head on a high guard.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some tricky stuff that he's going to offer. But yeah, disclosure, I ended up picking, if you read my breakdown on Junkie, I ended up picking Chandler, but yeah, I don't think Primus is getting enough credit here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a better fight than maybe most people are giving credit for. And I'm really anxious to see. I mean, if Chandler wins, you got to think maybe it sets up a trilogy somewhere down the road. If Primus wins, devastating for Chandler, man. That would be a tough spot to be in. He is such a talented guy, and again, he's the face of this organization in a lot of ways. He's one of their poster boys, and but to go 0-2 against a guy would put him in a really weird spot.
Especially after just renegotiating.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, it was funny. Primus was even saying, I was praying he didn't leave. I mean, Primus said how I wanted to fight him again. I wanted to show him I'm sick of him talking.
Yeah.
I was praying he didn't leave because I didn't want him to walk away thinking that was a fluke. He's like, I want to prove to him. The face-offs, they didn't have too much tension or any threat. I mean, Chandler's a pretty laid-back, cool guy, but there's some real animosity. These two guys do not like each other at all.
100%, man. I'm excited for it.
They don't. All right, let's talk about the co-main event, Javier Ayala versus Frank Mir. Frank Mir, of course, the former UFC heavyweight champion, but he is in need of a win. There's no question about it. He's had a bad streak here. He knows the end is coming. He says it's not here just yet, but he has his daughter here with him. He started to talk openly about the fact that she's going to be a professional fighter. He said maybe they'll get her some amateur fights next year. I did hear, and I believe it was on Phone Booth Fighting, his podcast with Richard Hunter, where I heard him say that, not that it's happening anytime really, really soon, but before he hangs it up, he wants to have a night where him and his daughter fight on the same card. He wants to do that before he calls it a career. So that would be intriguing. But interesting, he's had her here all week. And she's actually going to be in his corner, which I'm really intrigued by the psychology behind this, man. I really am, because man, you get it, man. You've been around this fight game for a long time, and of course they're all intense. But when you have a vested interest in somebody, when it's a loved one, or even when it's a training partner or somebody that you're really close with, it's harder. But when it's a loved one, man, it's tough. And so to have his daughter there in the corner, he's saying, it's all the motivation I need. I'm not going to let Javier Ayala kick my ass in front of my child. But I'm intrigued by his decision to have her in his corner, and he's saying, look, this is part of her education process. She wants to be a professional fighter, and I'm going to help her bridge that gap. But I'm super intrigued by it, and I wonder how it's going to impact him.
Yeah, me too, man. We were talking about this on the preview where it swung me one way and then I swung back the other. Now, I think this is because it comes down to, it tells us a lot about our projections of our feelings about it. Like, for example, when I had my amateur fight that you called, I told my mom, you know what? You don't have to go to watch this one. I don't, because for me, I treat it as a stressor. Family, I got to worry, from worried about the tickets and stuff of your fighters to just, I want to focus on me and my performance, and I'm okay with getting my ass kicked, which did happen. But the fact was, I don't need my family member. And some people have that view. They don't want to think about that. I know I'm not just projecting that totally there, but Frank Mir is not just a fighter. He's got how do I say this in a compliment? He's got all the screws loose in all the right places as a fighter, and I mean that as a compliment, right? I mean, you hear the stories. Frank Mir, he's a weapon in more ways than one, right? I mean, I don't know if it was Brendan Schaub saying if that guy falls down the stairs, just duck because gunshots are going to go off everywhere.
He carries an arsenal, man.
So hearing him, and maybe you relate to this more, John, having a son and in Eli, that the different family perspective, where that sounds to gear him a different way. Where he said it in the scrum, he said, I want to see what it looks like when someone tries to beat me up in front of my kid. I would like to see that. And I know Frank talks the talk, but goddamn, we've seen him walk the walk before, and that guy scares me.
He is, man. When he's on point, he's on point. Mm-hmm. And so I'm anxious to see how that works. He should beat Javier Ayala, but even Frank Mir said, listen, Javier Ayala, should have lost Sergey Kharitonov, and he didn't. So we'll see what happens. But that's a big fight for Frank Mir. AJ McKee is on the undercard as well against Daniel Crawford. I am high on AJ McKee. Talked to Scott Coker a little bit earlier this week, and I don't want to say he wasn't sold on him being a title challenger, but it's even at this point, it sounds like they're still kind of trying to slow play it a little bit with AJ McKee, and I don't necessarily understand why, because I think he's peaking, man. I really do. I've been high on him ever since he came to the promotion, and I feel like, yes, he may have had some not perfect performances along the way, but overall, man, I feel like he continues to improve. I feel like he is a phenomenal fighter, and I do believe. I don't want to completely write off Daniel Crawford here, but I'm just really high on AJ McKee. I do believe he is getting close to title consideration.
Yeah, me too. You know who he reminds me of? Talent and trajectory, or at least I hope, because now his trajectory is getting better, and he felt the same way too. Is Darian Caldwell?
Oh yeah,
I see a lot of parallels with those guys. Not necessarily their style, so to speak.
No.
Slightly different styles, though they are both southpaws.
Yep.
But just really sharp, really developing. And you're right, from the matchmaking, it almost looks like so. But I got to imagine, and you'll have a better feel than me. That I think that Bellator does have those plans, because when I was watching for example, even in Rome, I was trying to watch the DAZN, and that stream was a bit off, admittedly, on their end too. But one of the things they were playing for a filler, I noticed was a lot of like AJ McKee interviews, which was kind of random at the time, because it's a double event, and you're like, he's not fighting on either of these. Why are you playing these But then you're like, oh yeah, no, he's definitely a player, and so I'm hoping they're going to do something with him.
It's interesting because Bellator does have a little bit of a luxury, and I think it's good for developing fighters that they don't have to put you against killers every single time.
Yeah.
They can afford to bring you along a little bit, because you're not expected to have top 10 in the world talent in every single division, and you have it. And I think that's good for fighters, and I think it's a great opportunity to develop talent in the organization. But at some point, it was the MVP thing forever, right? When they were like, when is Michael Page finally going to fight a real fighter? And I'm not saying that AJ McKee hasn't fought real fighters, because he has. But he's not fighting the quite upper echelon yet, and I think that's okay. He's a super young kid, so you don't have to rush him. And if you could get the guy up to like 18-0, 19-0, 20-0, that's a hell of an impressive record to put on paper, But I do think you take the kid gloves off at some point, because I just honestly think that he's a talented enough fighter to do that. The main card rounds out on that Friday night show with Alejandro Lara versus Juliana Velasquez, and Derek Campos versus Sam Cecilia. Of course, former title challenger there in Alejandro Lara. Juliana Velasquez undefeated. Derek Campos will go out there and bang with anybody. I didn't recognize him with a beard this week.
I didn't recognize him on the scale. First time 145 too.
He came in and weighed in at 145, and it was kind of funny because I'd kind of forgotten that this fight was at featherweight, and I definitely didn't recognize him with a beard. So it was the official weigh-ins, and you feel bad when somebody's on the main card, and I was like, PR. Who is that? They're like, Derek Campos. I was like, oh, God, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The beard on there.
Stallion.
And, of course, Sam Cecilia, man, who's always willing to go out there and bang, former UFC fighter. Good dude as well, man. I've always been a big fan of that guy.
Yeah.
But some good fights there. The prelims, you've got some locals on there, as the way Bellator always does. You do have Nate Diaz, protege, in there, Chris Avila, and we saw Nate Diaz in the house today. Hobson Gracie Jr. debuting. Tywin Claxton at 150 pounds. It was funny. The official weigh-ins. Tywin got on the scale, and I guess some of the paperwork listed as 145. We thought it was a 145.
Yeah.
And it was funny because he got on the scale, and the guys registering the scale were like, they didn't want to say anything. They didn't know, and he was like, no, it's 150. It's 150. They're like, the contract's 150, and everybody kind of scrambled.
Yeah,
and I guess half the staff knew, and the other half didn't. Like some of the paperwork is wrong. So for a brief moment, everybody's like, what's this? So if you look at the official weigh-in pictures from Bellator, you'll see that he's looking at our camera lens with this little sheepish smile and a shrug, because everybody was freaking out, but it was supposed to be at 150. So what stands out to you? Is it Speedy or Air Claxton as he's known now? Is it the Hobson Gracie debut that you're most keyed up about? I mean, what's the one out there that if you had to pick something out that you're looking for, or is it Campos Cecilia, Lara Velasquez? What are you most excited there?
Man, no disrespect to the Gracies. I think Neiman is the Gracie probably getting the more spotlight this week. So for me, I guess I got to say Tywin Claxton. I mean, a little bit biased too. I shared a coach with him who was really high on him, Neil Melanson, and he just raved personally behind the scenes. He doesn't do that much with his guys. He's not that kind of a coach, or he doesn't try to promote or anything. But he's genuinely excited about the talent of Tywin Claxton. I think he showed us some of that talent.
Definitely, yeah. He's got some skills, no doubt about it. So, all right, let's do this. I hear my man Cold Coffee is messaging, and he said he's wrapping things up over there. So let's do this. Let's switch to gears for a second, and I had a chance to sit down at the Ritz-Carlton, by the way, with Scott Coker. He's staying at a very, very nice hotel, and we got to go to the restaurant there. It was a very very fine restaurant there overlooking the ocean. It was absolutely gorgeous. Herschel Walker ended up coming and hanging out for a little bit afterwards. Nice. But we got to sit down and have a little one-on-one with Mr. Scott Coker, and we talked about a lot of things, a lot of wide-ranging subjects. I'll pare it down a little bit because we had quite a lengthy conversation, but I figured there was a lot there. And hey, we go from UFC president one week to Bellator president the next, because that's how we do on the MMA Roadshow. So while we get cold coffee in, here is my conversation with Scott Coker.
Scott, here we are starting the week off at Bellator Hawaii, and I just got to ask kind of what your emotions like, excitement is like, because now that we're here, man, especially, it really feels like a special event. I mean, this is a return of big-time MMA to Hawaii. So what's it feel like for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because really the genesis of this was based off an event that Spike did 2 years ago called Rock the Troops. And The Rock hosted it. They had all these great actors and bands. They had 45,000 people show up. And they didn't do it this year. And we were going to tie into that event, actually. This year they decided not to do it. So I said, why don't we do something for the troops for Hawaii? And on Saturday we'll do a fight for the general public. On Friday we'll do a free fight for the troops. And then we'll bring our top guys and we'll, send them to different bases around the country. I mean, the island here. This is the only place outside of Washington, D.C. that all 5 military, the Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, they're all here. Washington, D.C. is the only other place that all 5, of the military are here, and Hawaii is one of them. So we've been out running around all the bases. I've seen the pictures of Herschel and Hoist Gracie and teaching seminars and doing clinics and survival skill training, and Herschel on this big gun trying to figure out if he was going to shoot it or not. So it's been a lot of fun, and really it's about giving back, giving value to the men and women that serve this country, and I think we're doing a great job so far.
Why did you target Hawaii as a market for an event? Because we know that there's a history of mixed martial arts here, but big-time MMA hasn't been here in a long time, and we know there's costs involved, there's operational difficulties in getting everybody. So what made you look at Hawaii and say, no, it's viable, we're going to do it?
Listen, there's a lot of dialogue about this company or that company not coming. We had nothing to do with that. My thing was like, look, did it pencil out for us? And it did. So I said, let's go do it, because Alima is from here. She went to Punahou High School. She's her family is very prominent here. I learned so much about her family just coming to Hawaii and talking to the people that her family, that the father was the PE coach at Punahou High School, and that she was part of the canoeing circuit here, the canoeing club. And in fact, I think they have a canoe race named after the family here.
Wow.
So prominent family type roots. And I said, she really wants to do it. She wants to go to Hawaii. Look, none of my staff complained that we're going to come to Hawaii and do this event. And I said, let's go for it. And so we penciled it out. We talked to Paramount and we talked to DAZN. They're like, let's do it. And here we are.
I know that, throughout your career as a promoter, you don't often like to take aim at another organization, but is there any little part of you in the back of your head that's just a little bit happy that you beat the UFC to Hawaii? They've been talking about it forever, and you were the guys to get here first.
Well, listen, like you said, I'm not going to compare us to other organizations, but we are here first, and it does feel good, regardless of any other organization. Everybody has choices to make, They had a choice of whether they want to come do it or not. They decided not to do it, and we did it, I don't think Max is too happy, but you can come watch our fights tomorrow night or Saturday night.
The Salute the Troops concept, you said, was kind of based on another idea that was done before. Mm-hmm. Is this something that you think the company will continue to do in the future? Is this a one-off? I mean, tell me about the decision to do something like this.
It's something that I'd like to come here once a year and do this dual event. Saturday night is open to the general public. Friday night is free for the troops, and it's a give back to the military and for all that they do for us. And it's just a feel-good show. And we've got so much support here from the mayor's office, from the governor's office, and from the military here. Everybody's embracing Bellator this week, and we're out there doing good community work. And good work, for the troops. That's really been there to protect this country. So I love it. I mean, I come from a military household, right? I mean, I grew up in Seoul, Korea, not too far from the base. My father was in the military there for a couple of years. So I remember when the USO shows would come into town and we would go watch a football game, or it just meant a lot to the community when events come into town that maybe are not part of the norm. And I think this is something that the troops really will enjoy on Friday night.
I'm excited for it. Let's start with Friday. We've got the rematch there that we've been waiting on forever, right? Primus and Chandler. What took so long to get this fight back together? I mean, this is a fight that seemed like it was a natural to do right away after the first time they fought. Why did it take so long?
I'll tell you, when I think back about it, it just time just flew on this one. And I know that there's some babies involved, and people having kids, and this. It's just stuff happens in life, and I think that's really what happened. Is we were ready to do it, and then somebody was having a baby and it pushed things back, and this person got hurt, and then this person had to fight because he has to fight, and it's just the nature of this business. Injuries happen, scheduling it happens, life gets in the way, and but here we are, 18 months later, and I think it's going to be an amazing fight.
I was going to say, I mean, the rivalry between these two. I guess if there's a bright spot of us waiting so long, is I feel like the tension is like just built this entire time. I mean, it seems to me there's some real animosity between these two guys and how they look back on that first fight.
Yeah, there definitely is, and I've seen some of the interviews that Michael has been doing, and he's taking it very personal, and. You know what? He wants to be the champ. He wants to be the belt holder, and he knows that Primus is the guy that he's got to beat to get there. So this is a personal mission for him. But there's going to be a lot of heat on this fight. That might be the fight of the night on Friday. That's going to be an amazing fight, and we've been waiting 18 months for it, and here we are. So it's going to be an exciting night.
You think if Chandler gets it done, that this sets up a potential trilogy down the line? I mean, do you see it ending 1-1 and moving on, or do you feel like there could be a potential trilogy?
You know what? I always like to wait and see what happens with the fight, So that's something that I think we could go, on Monday, we'll take a look at it and we'll decide, where it makes sense. And if it doesn't, we'll move forward and find other fights for Michael. If it was a great battle, it goes back and forth depending how it finishes, or if it's a decision or if it's submission or whatever. We'll decide at that time. Maybe a couple of days after the fight.
Yeah. AJ McKee on the card as well. I want to ask you about him. I mean, you guys have brought him along, and he seems to be peaking. Is this finally a number one contender type fight for him? I mean, are you starting to look at him at this point in his career as close to a title shot, or do you still feel like there's time?
I can tell you what he feels. He's ready. He's ready to go. But Dad feels like he's ready to go, And I think we're almost there. I think that we're almost there. And we just have an amazing division, and we'll have a lot of great fights for him. So I would say to AJ, hey, just, one fight at a time. Just keep doing what you're doing, and you'll be right in there soon, for that matchup.
Yeah, it could be a big night for him. Speedy Claxton's on there, which I'm anxious to see his return. Hobson Gracie Jr. is on there. I want to ask you about these martial arts, these kind of traditional martial arts, I would say, that you're bringing into MMA. I mean, I feel like you have done this more than any other organization, where you're finding these guys that come from a traditional martial arts background and don't have MMA experience, and you say, we're going to take a chance. Why is that? What do you see? Is that a personal promotional philosophy? Is it just the way things have worked out?
You know what? I think that, listen, I love, the martial arts coming into MMA. And I always said to, Kevin K and Viacom, I said, look, when I came here 4 years ago, I said, I'm going to bring martial arts back to MMA. And that was like one of my mission statements was, I think that we kind of got off a little bit, because this is a martial art and we should treat it as such. And to have a guy like Lyoto Machida, who is like one of the most ultimate, MMA traditional martial arts that have had success. I love working with Kung Lee, when he was fighting for me. I like working with, traditional jiu-jitsu fighters, because just watch them grow and learn and just become like an MMA fighter from a traditional jiu-jitsu, let's say, competitor. It's much different because somebody's punching you in the face now, and they're not taking you down just to submit you, but they're, trying to pound you out. So it's different, and it's something that it's important to me, and everybody that knows me knows that this is important. And I love working with martial artists. This is MMA. It should be martial artists.
No question. Saturday night, we've got Alimale McFarland in the headlining slot there against Valerie Letourneau. Alimale, her star is definitely growing, but I'm curious. I mean, you've been here a little longer than we have here in Hawaii. Can you give me an idea of how popular, how recognized, what her star power is here on the islands?
Yeah, she has a lot of pressure on her because when she walks out, it's going to be a madhouse, for her. And there's a certain amount of pressure that comes with being the hometown favorite. And there hasn't been a big fight here for 12, 13 years, since the Elite XC days. And so I think the island is ready for a big fight like this. Alima is a rising star. I think she's ready for this opportunity. Valerie is a killer, no joke, star as well. So to me, this is a fight that is going to be a test of, I want to say, her nerves and her will, and skill. And this is going to be an interesting fight because I'm telling you, this whole island is buzzing for Alima. And I see it, on bus sides around here, and I see, things that we didn't even do that local sponsors did for her here. And she went to Punahou High School, which Obama went to, and it's a very prominent high school. It's like one of the the most prominent in the island here. So she has a tremendous amount of family here, tremendous amount of friends here. It's going to be a lot of pressure. So let's see if she can handle it. That's going to be the key.
I like it. You also got the Bellator debut of Lyoto Machida. Mm-hmm. Why was he a good fit for? I mean, you mentioned just earlier you respect him as a traditional martial artist, but I'm just curious. I mean, you obviously, when you go after those free agents, those established talents, they come with a price tag attached. So why was he somebody that you were willing to say, let's spend the money on that guy?
I'll tell you, Lyoto's, and then my negotiation lasted really like 3 minutes. He said this is what he wanted, and I said, if I pay you that, would you come over? He said, I will. So I said, okay, we're done. That was it. I'm gonna fly back to San Jose now. But very rare. It's very rare to have a headliner become available at his level and his skill set. And I still think he's got a lot in the gas tank. Think about the fights he has ahead of him here. When he's finished with this fight, win or lose, I think he's got a fight ahead with Gegard Mousasi at some point. I think him and Ryan Bader have a fight down the line at some point. I think that he said to me, I want to fight Fedor too. I don't know. We'll see about that one. But, there's some good fights for him here. And, we're going to line him up for him and let him fight. But I think Gegard and Bader at some point, next year definitely will, be fighting. And I think that's going to be an exciting fight. But I love the matchups that were possible and just all the mixing up of these top athletes, the very top that we can put together. And he was a great piece of that. So that's why we said, okay, we're going to pay you because we want you to be the guy that can put these fights together. And he was happy to do it. And like you said, he said, hey, I have nothing against, the other organizations, but it's ready. I'm ready to leave. And it's time for me to make a move, because I'm ready to go. And so that's why we made the deal.
How much do you think, or do you envision Bellator being a player in big free agent markets going forward? I mean, I guess competition is good for the open market, but you also have to be financially sensible as well, right? So how much do you envision Bellator being a player for these contracts when they come up?
I mean, think about it. Start with Roy McDonald. You got Gegard. You have Fedor was a free agent when we picked him up. You have, we had to deal with Chael. And then Lyoto Machida. I mean, we picked up some really good free agents along the way. And, and there's some that we passed on, and there's some that we really were very aggressive. And to me, it's like how I view it is like, how does this person fit into our organization? And how does this person fit into the fights that we want to make for this organization? And, there will be more free agents. And we'll go after the ones that we really, really want. And then the others that we don't, they'll end up somewhere else. And it's good. It creates a healthy industry because it's not just about one company anymore. I mean, if Bellator wasn't here, it's like when Strikeforce was sold, right? Then the UFC had all the talent, and there's no second buyer, right? So prices start going down on what they're offering, because managers were calling me, Bob Cook especially, going, "Hey, Coker, this is great and everything, but now I'm getting offered 20% less than before, because there's no. You need to have 2 or 3 bidders to create a healthy industry, and we're doing our part, because let me tell you, the amount of commitment that Viacom and Paramount have to go after free agents that we really want is unlike anything else. I mean, they've told me, if you see somebody you really want, come to us, and we'll go do it. We'll make it happen. So their commitment's strong.
Nice. How close were you on Eddie Alvarez? I feel like that was one that people thought might fit.
Eddie was really like maybe a 15-second conversation. Really, it was like, they came to Rich and they said, I go, well, what do they want? He said, well, he wants this. I said, well, we're not going to do that. So tell him thank you, but we'll pass. And that was it. That's the only conversation we had with Eddie. And listen, I hope he does well. I hope he has a good career, and he seems like a great guy. But it's like there has to be a certain amount of, I don't know what it is, but I think there's like who are the $500,000 fighters? Who are the $1 million fighters? Who are the $250,000 fighters? Because there has to be a return on our end too, right? And so, it would be great for him and Chandler to lock horns one more time, but that would be at the expense of the company probably losing money, So listen, Chandler has been here for a long time, and if we're going to pay anybody, we're going to pay our guy.
No doubt. I wanted to ask you, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but your old friend Nick Diaz has taken to social media. He's been on Instagram saying good things about you, saying he likes working with you and he kind of misses you. He misses the good old days of Scott Coker. Yeah. Is there any discussion on that front? Is that somebody that you've been considering?
Well, Nick's in the contract, so I haven't spoken to Nick in maybe a year or 6 months. I know he's out, doing his running and bicycling and doing what he does. But listen, I've always had a great relationship promoting Nick, and he's a friend, and he's somebody that really I love promoting in Strikeforce. I love watching him before that when he was fighting, and he's just those 2 brothers are you never know what's going to come out of their mouth, but for me it's like he's part of the family. No matter where he is now, he's still part of the family, and I think he feels it too. Because we were very good to him, he was good to us, and it was a good relationship.
Very cool. We do have a welterweight Grand Prix bout this weekend as well. I want to ask you, Grand Prix moving forward. I mean, we've got one wrapping up, we've got another kind of getting underway. Mm-hmm. What do you see? Do you see this as a long-term fixture of the company to showcase these types of Grand Prix, or were these special situations? What do you think?
I think people love it, and really I feel like the heavyweight tournament was, to me, a tournament that we would create the champion, right? And now we have the finals coming in January, so that's going to be over. But what I learned along the way is that people still love it. People want that like that single elimination event that leads to like a finals. And I think that what we bring a tournament that everybody knows who the fighters are. Like we're going to bring 8 big stars, and they're all going to fight, and they're going to continue, and then you'll have one person. Everybody understands the single elimination format. So I think people really appreciate that. So we have our welterweight tournament. People are loving it. I think that people are excited about the next fight with Ed Ruth and Neiman Gracie, which to me is going to be an amazing matchup. And then MVP Daly. I mean, that's going to be a big fight in February. Excuse me. So we're going to get behind the welterweight tournament, for the next year, and then we'll take it from there. But I personally love it. I think it's been a good piece of business for Bellator, and it's worked for us on the TV ratings, international sponsorships. It's been very good.
You touched on MVP Daily, so I guess I got to go ahead and bring it up. People wonder why it didn't happen in England. They said this is a natural fit. It's got to be in England. So explain to us why it didn't make sense for it to happen in England.
That's a good question, and we did try. And the issue really was that the broadcast partner, wanted to have it here. But we went and talked to them, and James Rushton, the CEO of DAZN, we sat down with him. We said, we really feel like this fight should be here in London. And we were in London at the time. He said, okay, you can do it here. So there just was no venues available. in London at that time. We could have went to, Newcastle or Ireland or, but we said, look, if we're not going to do it in London, we might as well do it in America where they really want it anyway. But James Rushton did say, you guys could do it here if you find the venue. So he gives the green light. We looked, we tried to challenge dates, this, that, and there was just nothing available. So we had to do it in this time frame. And in the month of February, there's only, the O2 Arena and SSA Wembley. And that's pretty much it. And there's just no dates available, so we ended up doing it at the Morning Sun on February 16th.
Fair enough. You mentioned a couple of cities around Europe. You're launching a European fight series. Give us an idea what the goal is. I mean, what the concept behind it. I mean, it's I imagine you'll be cultivating some talent, but what can we expect to see out of that, and what is the ultimate goal of it?
You know what? Talent is a big piece of that because I think there's some gems out there, and going around the world and seeing all these other fight companies or seeing the fighters fighting on our undercard, there's a lot of talent out there. And so to me, it's like, let's go find the next gem and develop it and build it. But there's also something to be said about the local broadcaster wanting a localized product, and whenever we be in different territories, they're like, man, we love it, but I hate it when it's on at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. Can't you do something here locally for us? And that was the other drive was, Viacom is a worldwide company, have branches all over the planet, and they're like, come on, like, can't you create like a localized product for us? And so we're launching with Channel 5 with Newcastle, and it's a local product for their time zone and not have to watch it 2 in the morning, and we'll primarily focus a lot on the local talent pool from the UK, Ireland, Spain, Italy, just that Western Europe region, Sweden, and we'll be looking for the next guy, the next girl, but part of that equation is, for the TV broadcaster, how do you create a localized product? And that's what the answer was, because now we have a product that we can offer 8 to 10 localized fights, as well as our 22 fight package from here, and it's a much more robust TV package when you add it all up.
I guess maybe one step at a time, but knowing that that's the model and what you can do, I mean, is that something you could replicate in other areas of the globe?
You know what? I'd say don't be surprised by 2021. We'll be in Asia doing 8 to 10 fights a year. I think between Japan, Korea, and China, maybe 2 to 3 fights each. So we'll have an Asian circuit, localized for them. We'll have Latin America. They'll have its own circuit. Europe will have its own circuit, and so that'd be like let's say a 10 fight series in each one of those territories, plus the 22 we do here. So it's going to be like a 52-week, a year, business, because we're going to do fights. We'll probably be doing 50 fights a year in the next 2 or 3 years. So we're definitely on our way.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Let's get a couple of quick other updates. Rory McDonald, have you spoken to him? How's he doing? What's his condition and his plan moving forward?
Yeah, he's healing up, but I think he's starting to train now, stretch and train and getting back. But he will be fighting John Fitch sometime in March. So we're finalizing the location of that fight. And then we'll get into the semifinals May. And then June, and then September will be the finals. That's kind of like the time frame for the tournament for the year.
Exciting. Darian Caldwell, send him over to Japan. Give me an idea. Why did this make sense? I mean, this was pretty cool. I think it took everybody by surprise, and everybody was pretty excited about it. But why did it make sense for you to send your guy over there?
I was talking to a good friend of mine, actually, that manages Horiguchi, right? And we almost bid for Horiguchi at one point because I liked him, nice kid, and so Fumi, his manager, his manager lives in San Jose and was part of AKA, and so we always hung out. And he said, Scott, please send DC to come fight Horiguchi. I'm like, nah, it's. So I made a comment at a press conference saying, come on, Sakibara, let's do this. I'll bring DC and we'll fight Horiguchi. And I just stood out there, and then my phone starts blowing up that night. Come on, let's do it. So we talked to DC's people. They're like, oh, we would love to do it. It's like his dream to fight in Japan. So I said, okay, let me organize a few things, on my end. and we put it all together, and now, he's going to fight for the Ryzen belt. The Bellator belt's not on the line, but if he goes there and DC loses, there's a guaranteed rematch in Bellator as part of the deal. And if he goes there and wins, then I agree with Saki Guevara that once a year DC will go there to defend the Ryzen belt.
Interesting.
And if Horiguchi beats DC here as well, then we have to have access to Horiguchi to fight in Bellator once a year to defend his Bellator belt.
And he would come fight for that Bellator belt.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the thing is, we talk about like the whole thing with Ben Askren was saying, well, he wanted to fight, and we were offering the tournament. To me, it's like, look, we can't go do co-promotions with other promoters unless we have access to the athletes. And that was the problem with Ben and the ONE FC thing, was he wanted to fight one time and we wouldn't have access to him anymore. Well, that doesn't work for me. But this situation, we agree that we have access to the athletes. And I tell you, DC is really excited. And he's going to go over there. And I think he's got a good shot, to take him.
It's going to be a great fight. Do you think this is the first of many? Could we see more talent exchange like this moving forward?
Yeah, I think this is a case-by-case basis. And, I think that let's see how this one goes. But listen, we're not afraid to put our guys, up, and put them in risk or harm's way, in the sense that, hey, any fighter can get beat at any time. But it's just that, there has to be a certain amount of, business understanding, that makes sense for us and for Ryzen to do these types of deals. But listen, I've been going to Japan for, since the late 90s and working in a martial art fight company there. So I think I have a good understanding of how it works and what they're looking for. And I think that as long as the fighters want to do it, Saki Guevara and I can have a good understanding, we'll do it, because to me, I think it's creating a lot of excitement for, two fighters that, collectively together they can create a much more exciting, matchup than if they fought somebody else, just for Ryzen or Bellator. People are talking about this fight now, right? Because it's Ryzen versus Bellator, and that's how they're promoting it over there.
All right, so well, a lot of exciting things going on right now, but I'll just wrap it up with this. Give me the idea for 2019. I don't want to skip past what we've got left this year, but what's the vision next year? Are there goals? Are there check boxes that you want to tick off? What do you see for the future of the company next year?
Well, you know what? We're going to continue going after every free agent that we believe in, that we think can fit for the company. We're adding our European series. That's going to be a very important piece of business. So now we're going to go from 22 fights to probably 32 fights next year. International expansion as far as television distribution. Right now we're in 163 countries around the world. We're going to continue to grow that. I think that when you look at the blue chip sponsors that we have in Bellator, to me, it's pretty amazing, because 10 years ago those sponsors were not here, right? It's a much different environment, and Viacom has a great sales team that's out there selling, Boost Mobile and it's Light Beer from Miller, and with Monster we just renewed with Monster for 3 years. So great sponsorship, but we're building a great business, and I think that it's going to be something that will help propel us to grow faster, more free agents, better fights. And DAZN, that was another great piece of business for us too. And they've been great partners, and they're heavily into boxing with Canelo now, and so I think we're gonna get some crossover audience between MMA and boxing. And so it's a lot of great things ahead. And when I think about the schedule, like these two fights, and then end of January, come on, we're gonna crown a new heavyweight champion, and you got Fedor fighting Ryan Bader, and then you got Gegard Mousasi fighting. It's going to just be an amazing fight night on end of January, and then February we got return of the tournament, and we got Crow Cop fighting Roy Nelson, and the number one contender Czech Congo fighting Minikov, and then on Friday night we have Mitrione fighting Karatanov. We just got some great. Didn't mean to say that, but we have some great fights, and and it's just going to continue on and on and on. One of the things I really love about this job is that I get to sit down with my guys, and we get to put on great fights, and we get to sit down. What about if this guy fought this guy? What about the other guy fought this guy? And that's really part of my early upbringing was, it was kickboxing, but I was like, well, what if that Brad Hefton fought, Don Wilson, or this guy fought, who would win? And that was, part of my upbringing was going, hey, let's go do it. Let's go put it together. Now I'm not gonna just talk about it. I'm gonna go put the fights together, and that's how I got into this business. So that continues here many years later. Now it's in MMA. I get to sit down with Rich and all the guys, and we sit down, and it's a collective process. I take everybody's input. We all talk about it, and we make the fights that the fans want to see. So it's gonna be a great year in 2019 for Bellator.
Welcome back to the MMA Roadshow. That was Scott Coker, the Bellator boss. Speaking of bosses, look at this boss that just rolled in here. Cold coffee, rolling in hot.
Hot and late and slow and low. I'm doing the Hawaii thing. I even put my flip flops on. Or actually, I don't think these are called flip flops. These are more sandals. I think flip flops are the ones that go between the toes and make the clop clop noise and flip up and hit your foot. I don't know.
Are those your big baller sliders?
Yeah,
big baller brand sliders.
These are Reef brands. I've had them forever, but they have the bottle openers on the bottom.
Get the heck out. Look at that.
Cold
they
coffee
actually,
and not just like one.
Always
they
prepared.
put them on both of them.
Oh wow.
They're like little bottle openers.
Bottle opener on the bottom of your sandal.
The only thing about it is that sometimes when I'm sitting on a stool, that little lip thing will hit like the metal lip, and I'll forget it's there, and I'm like, what is that stupid tinging noise? I'm like, oh, that's right, it's my bottle opener hitting the
So those reefs are roadshow ready, you'd say?
Yeah, dude, these are the best. I think surfers probably knew about it for a while. I don't know if the Reef even still does it, but yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, well, that's a done deal right there. Give
Definitely
me
in on that.
Give me those sandals.
So give us your impressions of Honolulu so far. I mean, you've seen the inside
my
of your hotel room.
My hotel room looks wonderful. I see your hotel room looks very similar. Your view is actually pretty good. My view is over the pool that we use kind of as the backdrop and stuff. So later in the evening, I have decent music that you can hear.
Right.
But besides that, I mean, like, there's a B-dubs here.
Yes, we did make it to B-dubs Honolulu. And in fairness, I mean, while I am a B-dubs aficionado, let's just say, and let's be clear, it's not as if we had to seek it out. It's literally like the first restaurant you run into when you walk off the property.
Oh, they were asking for it then.
But I mean,
when you
I did notice that it was there.
When you jaywalk across the street, the first establishment you run into is the
if you wait for the timing of the lights the right way, the jaywalking's not as dangerous.
Yeah, like when you're sober, like on the way to the bar is a little bit better. But I mean, no, so far, I mean, it's been good. The only parts of Hawaii I've seen really outside of this enclave of this resort has been like the military bases and then driving to and from. It's been like very green and rich and lush, and I love the trees. And maybe, Dan, you could tell me what the type of trees. I think they look like, to me, like the little mini bonsai trees.
Oh yeah.
Because they grow up, but they're flat, and like the leaves are like almost like pine or fir or whatever, but they're like flat, and like they have weird like branches that go down almost. We saw some that it almost looked like you poured wax, and like the trunks just sort of meld together and all this stuff. Very, very unique trees and stuff, but it's beautiful. I mean, like the landscape. But I don't know what those trees are called, but I just called them big bonsai trees.
Giant bonsai trees.
Giant bonsai trees.
The trunk you described, that sounds really bad. It sounds like a banyan tree, but the actual trees I think you're describing, the bonsai trees. There's actually one in front of my grandma's place where I'm staying.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where like the lifts and Ubers go pick it up. So I asked the person at the lobby. I don't know if they're called a concierge, if it's an apartment complex or whatever, but she's like, yeah, just go down to the monkey tree over there, and that's where the lifts and Ubers pick it up. So that was a new one to me, monkey tree.
Weird.
All right, okay.
Like, are you being racist right now? Or
I don't know. I don't know.
I imagine maybe at one point monkeys maybe did live in the trees, but I don't know. But so it's been pretty neat. Like today was the first day. It did not get rained on here.
That's true. It has rained every. Something we should say. I mean, Dana has always said. Dana White from the UFC has always said. Listen, one of the reasons that I don't want to go to Hawaii is there's the Blaisdell Arena, which is really tiny, which is where we're going to be in, but they're doing back-to-back nights, so that kind of makes up for it. Or we do Aloha Stadium, which I'm sure the UFC could fill Aloha Stadium.
Yeah.
but you got to do it outside. And you're right, it has rained every single day.
Every day. I
until
mean,
today.
It's been like on and off, but
Yeah.
even with just the on off, like, I mean, I had times where my gear was sort of malfunctioning, and I mean, that's just me with my little handheld. I can only imagine if you got cameras and cameras out there and all the lighting gear that you'd have to.
Yeah.
There's no way that you'd have to do it, let alone to find the area where if they were going to try to move everything in like an outdoor area. I just don't. I mean, granted,
to like stage everything.
Like, where are you even going to put that sort of thing?
Right.
You know. But I don't know. It's beautiful. I'm looking forward to, maybe even tomorrow morning before we go to the event, even though we had the early weigh-ins, but maybe in between to try to go look at the beach or something. But if anything else, we got the last day, so I don't know. It's Hawaii, but it literally is.
Just feels like every other week.
Feels like another event,
I know.
which
Oh,
sucks.
wow,
Except
wow.
for the fact that the weather is beautiful,
Yeah.
and like we did have our first Loco Moco Bowl. Moco Loco Bowl was Loco
Locomoco, you got it right.
Loco
Yeah,
Moco
yeah.
here, which was good. I thought it was a decent representation. I've had some better ones
Right.
back
Okay.
in Vegas, but it was good. But it still hit the spot. It was the first meal we had yesterday, and literally was like a gut buster. Like, after we ate that, we were just like, this is before you showed up at the
Yeah,
bar.
yeah,
We were
yeah.
just kind of sitting there like, I don't think we said a word
No.
between the two of us while we
Sure.
were eating, because it was
That
just
was
like
first meal of the
eat,
day.
and then we were just like,
Especially if it's a heavy meal that hits
Oh,
the
yeah,
spot like
man.
that after you guys
Oh, yeah.
working
Good.
all day.
Yeah, we hadn't
I would
eaten all
have
day.
another one.
You
I
know.
would have another one.
It is funny. Normally we're pretty quick to get out of here, out of town on Sunday, but we took the 10:30 p.m. flight
Wow,
home on
look at you
Sunday. Yeah,
guys.
so we will be we'll be roadshow ready by the time we jump on the plane to head home on
Yeah.
Sunday night, I think.
I hope they have a place to put your luggage
I
here.
was going to
Oh,
ask
I'm
you guys
sure they
about
do.
that. I took the
I don't
opposite.
know. They don't even have offices. The lobby is literally. Did you talk about what the lobby looks like? The
No.
lobby literally is like an outdoor. Like, if you pull up like in a valet to get dropped off, you see a row of like desks against the wall underneath like the covered awning that leads in between different hotels, and that's the lobby. There's not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're not walking into a building and walking up to the reception area. Literally, if gale force winds want to come rushing over the island, they will go through the lobby and take everybody down, and there's no structure to protect anybody.
It is pretty wild, right?
So I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if there's an area to put our stuff for like that last day. We're gonna have to see where we can either store our stuff, because I can't take all my gear down to the beach.
Nah.
you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Surely there's a concierge that can hold on
I
to
would
it or
hope
something,
so.
or a bell desk or something
I
they
would
can
hope
hold
so.
on to it.
Throw him a 20 spot and make sure it
build a
stays
hut
safe.
or something, sit in the back or something. I don't know, but it's been neat.
You did. I was gonna say the first day we were here, so we got in late Monday night, and then Tuesday I actually had to just sit here and work from my hotel room. I had to work desk duty, but you went out to the base, hung out with your new,
one of them. Yeah.
hung out with your new buddy Herschel Walker, right?
No, Herschel was.
Herschel was in the other group.
Herschel was in the other group. I got to hang out with Big John, Josh Thompson, and Hoyce Gracie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went to one of the Army barracks here. Got to see meet and talk with one of the 2-star generals, which you don't see those every day.
Right.
And then met a lot of troops, and they were doing some different combative trainings and stuff. And it's funny kind of watching. You got those 3 guys, and there's no set structure. They didn't game plan on the road, getting there like, all right, what are we going to teach them? One of them usually just sort of steps up. And I was kind of wondering how that would happen, how that would go down. And they kind of chatted a little bit, and Hoyce kind of took the reins and was showing them this sort of sidekick move, and I'm thinking like, if I'm thinking about
Who wants to
striking
learn a
and other
sidekick
stuff,
from
I'm like
Hoyce Crazy?
I'm like, where does Hoyce get this? And it was like awkward as it was awkward.
Was
as
it the one
fuck.
to the knee?
No, he was trying to get it right into the side, and he was even like bringing it up, and then eventually they got to a point where I think Josh could sort of adapt and was like, all right, if you want, you could even take this down to the thigh, you can go later. So eventually they built on steps to it, but the first one kind of was Hoyce teaching them to do this sidekick. And
Is he
part of
just
this-
like so bored
Not-
with grappling now? Like he's just I just grapple.
I guess I should have set this up because they had to call an audible because they walk into the gym, and I think the ultimate goal was to do jiu-jitsu.
Right.
They walk into this big, huge basketball gym. There's all these soldiers on the right-hand side sitting down waiting to meet them, ready to do it. What did you think was lacking that would really, really help if you were going to
Mats?
teach jiu-jitsu.
Mats?
Mats.
Yeah. Oh my
There were
God.
absolutely
a
no
hard
mats.
basketball court.
So
nice.
like they kind of looked at themselves and they were like, okay, what are we gonna do now?
Okay.
So I figured it would be probably some sort of striking of some, but it just struck me as very odd that it was
Hoist that took the lead.
that
to
took
teach
the lead
striking.
and did it. So and they kind of just built on that first step. So they did the side kick and then took it to where. You did the side kick, and then you stepped down, and you took that lead leg that would have kicked the side kick, and stepped into the middle of their legs, and then, so what it was is, if you're pushing the guy back, and then say he comes at you, so what it would do is you step down in between his legs, and as his arms are coming forward, you kind of swim over his arms and reach around the back, so then you'd secure, and then you get the underhooks, and then and then you place your head and you secured your head so that you couldn't get strikes. That was like the second step.
Okay.
And so they had all these troops and they go around. And what was awesome was like they literally took it like they were drilling. You could tell they did classes and you could tell these soldiers did it because they were like, all right, this is what you can do. We're going to do this, this, this. You set? Okay, all right, drill. Or all right. What it wasn't like ready break, but it was like 1, 2, 3, go or whatever. And it wasn't like they said like this is what we're gonna say.
Right.
It just came. It just so it was like okay, like you could tell these people had drilled, just with the different like cadence or whatever you wanted to do. And then Josh started adapting his to like different ones where, and that head movement and then the swim in the arm that was still Hoist's like kind of addition onto the first one.
Right.
And then Josh started adapting and say, well, what I would do in this position, instead of just tucking your head here, start taking, I would take my forehead and I'd drive it up under my opponent's chin. So I'm driving his head upwards so that he's looking upward, because if he's looking upward, he can't be throwing punches like this because it's going to throw off his balance and it's going to throw off how he strikes, So I was like, okay. And so it was a nice logical progression that they were starting to teach these guys so that initially if a guy's coming at you, and a lot of what these guys are learning, so we might have these crazy rockets and tanks and all these drones and all this other shit, but a lot of the battles that are happening are in close quarters.
Right.
So if you're say entering a house or entering a building and the immediate thing is that a perpetrator, something's coming towards you, what's one of the first quickest things that you could do? And if they're coming at you and you sort of size up your position, well, but a lot of times you would have your side arm already or something. But, that side kick, because if you're doing like a proper side kick, you're kind of turning away from the person, you're bringing your hip back, and then you're launching that foot out. So you're kind of giving yourself a little bit of distance. Yeah. So they were actually teaching things that made sense for what these guys would probably see in duty, and then eventually went on to kind of when that arm with the underhooks where they were secured in the back, what they did on one of the other steps was when you're going in for that clinch, then you take your outside leg, say if I'm holding them and I'm sort of putting my lead leg's my right leg and I'm pushing my head onto that side, with your left leg sort of stepping around their outside leg, and then with that knee hitting the back side of the knee while still holding position, get them to lose the balance. Kind of like if you ever walked up behind something that had their legs locked and you hit them on the back of the knee and they're like, whoa, and they lose their balance. Yeah. So while you have that grip, you kind of pull it in tight and move your arms down. And it wasn't, and like what they were reiterating, it wasn't about a lot of force, like pick you up and move you, but with just technique, sliding the arms down and with that knee, stepping around, hitting that knee, and then we're able to kind of pull them down to the ground and eventually either mount or do whatever. But again, it was like logical steps that they could have taught them all kinds of shit. Right. Who knows what, but out of not really planning and preparing what they're going to do, what came from it was a logical series of steps that made sense. That's awesome. For them, they could take away from it, and that if somebody did, even in a situation, because they showed that, because some of the guys were much bigger than their partners that were doing it. But with the right technique and with these guys showing it, it was a simple move that they could gain the upper hand and get this guy down, which could very well happen in a lot of situations. So I was really impressed by how they kind of threw it together, because it could have been very half-assed. Let's teach them how to throw right cross and then just call it a day. Right. Okay, that's fair and good, but how often are guys in the military sitting in a fight, going like, all right, let's square up. I'm gonna fucking throw a right cross, dude. You know, like
Not happening.
it's not gonna happen like that.
If you're at kickboxing range, you're at shooting range, basically at that
right?
point.
So, but it was cool. It was interesting. The troops were really stoked to go around and see it, and I learned some new little fire starting tricks. That was what happened on the first day. Was the primitive fire starting. If you guys haven't seen it, like you'll see it on YouTube. But this is something I want to go and teach like my nieces and nephews, like anybody young. So what they had was they had bamboo. They showed one way. Say if you had a bamboo. Just for something that you can kind of imagine what you would use. You could either use a piece of bark or something to sort of become a shell that you could stick the different brush and this different stuff to eventually start a little bit of a fire that you add the small kindling, the embers, and then eventually you transfer it to a bigger one. But what they're calling them tacos, fire tacos. So imagine a bamboo shoot kind of cut in half, so you have two halves that look like a little half circle.
Yeah.
All right, so and on top of that, they had this different sort of like, if you ever find those trees that the bark sort of pulls away and there's like that sort of brushy, woody material that just sort of pulls apart, any of that sort of stuff that's kind of flammable. You could even take the reeds, like if you have cattails and some of the furry fluff that you find on a lot of plants, some of that stuff, any of that stuff that's really sort of just kind of goes. They took some of this stuff and put it on this little taco. But the next steps that that got me was they took a piece of steel wool. Steel wool that normally is, unless you know what it can do, you're probably not going to have it in your camping or your survivor gear. Now that I know what it does, I'm going to be having it in my fishing gear, my camping gear. But you take the steel wool and sort of spread it out so that it's not that big giant clump, but that it sort of pulls apart, and it's just kind of like a fluffy gray cotton ball. The stuff just pulls apart. And then mix it amongst the different, whatever sort of quick burning fuel that you have found that you can put in there. Then what happens when you take the 9-volt and you touch it onto the steel wool, it immediately sparks and starts to burn. And then at that point, all you do is, as you're tapping around the different areas with the 9-volt battery on the steel wool, and it literally, if you blow it right and you get it going, it just embers up and it just starts flaming.
It's like a movie.
And then you just start adding the other little bigger fuel, and then you take your little fire taco that you go, place it under. If you have, I always did like the TP method that Boy Scouts you do, but you get big enough, and then stick it under there, and dude, it's just lit. There's no and what happened? The steel wool, it works even if the steel wool is wet. So say if it's completely wet, whereas say if you have a matches. And a lot of people say, well, I just got matches. But if your matchbox gets wet and then your matches get wet, you can't light them until they're dry. The steel wool could be absolutely wet, and you can take this 9-volt, and it'll cause the little sparking, almost like if you are trying to light your grill with a piece of paper, and you're not getting the flame, but you're getting that little red ember that goes along the paper, and it just wants to kind of burn.
Yeah.
So when you have that with the steel wool and the other stuff and blow, it causes it to ignite. So you could have wet steel wool, you could be in the rain, but as long as the little fluff and the fuel you have is dry, put it in there and you can get a fire started.
Look at that. Who tuned into the MMA Road Show thinking they were going to get survival skills?
I'm telling you, everybody now, just go to YouTube. You can go to YouTube and just do a search, 9-volt and steel wool, and you'll see it. And it is game changing.
I was gonna say, Kenny just taught all your listeners how to take someone down and start a fire. By the way,
that's it, man.
So just
that's how we do.
So when you need to burn the body, cover it in the steel wool.
This could be worse than your Red Dead Redemption talk, guys.
Maybe you could take a giant car battery.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's talk about Bellator 213. We went through 212, 213. Alima Leigh McFarland and Valerie Letourneau. Alima Leigh McFarland, of course, if you're a dedicated listener to the MMA Road Show, you'll know that she is a bit of a road show favorite. An event out in Temecula, she was there as a guest fighter and basically set in on the whole show, and basically at 125 pounds just pretty much outdrank me pounding beers, and she is fun to hang out with, no question about it.
All around better athlete than you.
She's definitely a better athlete than me.
Better
It turns out
she
can even drink better than me, which is amazing. And then, of course, Valerie Letourneau, who Valerie Letourneau looks night and day better at 125 pounds than she did at 115. We were at some of those 115 fights where she just looked god awful.
Yeah, she looked very sucked in and just depleted.
She looks good this week.
Yeah.
She's vibrant. You can see it in her personality. You can just see it in the way her body looks. So I'm pretty intrigued by this
looking
fight.
at her body?
Shut up, like any fighter.
Were you looking at
just
her
like
body?
any fighter?
I'm just kidding. Because we talked about it yesterday. I was looking at the open workout footage. I'm sorry, I'm a dude. I was just like, dude, Valerie looked good. But I was like, but then when you want to look, and then you see this hulking Hector Lombard in the background, you're like, don't get caught looking. Don't get caught looking. Don't get caught looking.
One of the scariest text messages I ever received was from Hector Lombard. It wasn't even a bad one, but just receiving a text message from that man. The fact that that man has your number.
Yeah, you don't want him to have your number.
I'm like, no.
Yeah, but you're right. She looked good. I thought. I mean, it wasn't like it was like a striking clinic, but the fact that she had plenty of energy at open workout. A lot of times we've seen her in the past, and it's going through the motions.
Yes.
It's like you're looking
She's
up
barely
here.
there.
You're like, oh man, she just wants to get through. But she looked like she was having fun. I mean, she was taking in the whole scene. That was a pretty unique scene. Just the different fans coming out. I don't think there was any fighter that looked like they were having a bad time doing open workouts.
They were enjoying it.
Normally
Out
it's
on-
an
out on
obligation.
the
They
beach.
were all having a good time yesterday. So
Listen, Alimale has promised a bit of a surprise to the walk-in. She's saying that it's going to be something that's going to be very emotional, that she admits that she's probably going to be emotional. She says her family will be in tears. So far this week, she's handling the responsibilities really, really well. Doesn't look to be overwhelmed by the moment, but she said herself, once they get inside Blaisdell, it's going to be something different. So we'll see how she deals it. But, Dan, Tom, break down just kind of what you see. I mean, I guess on the surface you could say it's striker versus grappler if you wanted to make it that simple, right? But, again, I think if you're looking at intangibles, it's going to come down to how Alimale handles herself that night. You know, Valerie actually said in her scrum, which I thought was interesting, she's like, I remember the first time I fought in my hometown, I hated it. It sucked. You know what I mean? I froze, basically. I froze under the lights, and I remember it. So those are intangibles.
Yes.
You can't really determine necessarily how this is going to go. But as far as just the actual breakdown goes, how do you see this fight?
I'll actually steal the, I did break the fight down, and you can read that breakdown on MMAjunkie.com right now. But I will actually steal the talking points from both Alimale and Valerie, because I believe they are both spot on in picking the one thing that's not really being talked about as much in the mainstream as far as this fight goes. One, Alimale McFarland giving Valerie Letourneau for her grappling credit. I remember breaking down the Christina Williams fight, and I said, people think that Valerie Letourneau's just a striker, but considering that Christina Williams just wants to strike, don't be surprised to see her go for a takedown. Now, she was a bit stubborn to go for that takedown. I believe it didn't happen until later in round 2, maybe round 3. But we saw that she can get offensive with it. She's pretty good defensively. I don't want to say pretty good. She's never been submitted in her 10-year career, and she has a pretty long career as far as female goes. Letourneau, I'm speaking of. So that's one thing to watch out here. To be wary of the striker versus grappler.
And said she spent a lot of time, by the way, training with Jillian Robertson as a training partner.
Really
who's
good arm
a
bars.
crafty grappler. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, great training partner.
Yep.
You're right there. And as far as the other side, Valerie smartly stated that not even talking about the grappling or the fact that Alimale, especially people like myself picking her, think okay, she's going to have to make it ugly whether or not she can get the submission. She's going to have to make it an ugly fight. But what I found interesting, Valerie said, is that she gave credit to Alimale's composure, and that's something that I picked up on. It's a strength of hers standing, it's a strength of hers on the ground, it's a strength of hers in the fight, that she's not easily rattled. So if this fight isn't going her way, I don't expect her to fold, Alimale to fold and pack up home if things don't go her way early, which is going to make it a more compelling fight.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. I'm excited for that one. Co-main event, Rafael Carvalho versus Lyoto Machida. Great seeing Lyoto Machida again. I got to say, first of all, he looked fantastic. And if there was ever a guy that needed to be at a beachside workout, it was Lyoto Machida and his family doing karate. I mean, it was just such a cool little thing.
Cool.
The dad, calling out the chant, and they were doing it. Very, very cool. But you know what? I don't know what it is this week. This is the first time, I think I'm just getting used to seeing these ex-UFC fighters in Bellator. Like, it used to be odd to me, like, when they came over, I'm like, oh, this is weird. They're in the new organization, and how are they adapting? And I wonder what their fight week is like, and are they regretting it? Are they thinking about it? I don't know. For whatever reason, for me personally, just seeing Lyoto this week, it was just like, it's Lyoto. And I don't know. I'm starting to kind of the differences between the organizations and I don't know. Obviously, the UFC is still the bigger brand. They still have the bigger shows. There's no question about that. But I don't know. Seeing these guys kind of float around now, it's not as weird to me anymore.
Yeah, but you're right. I could see where you would think that, Because for a while there, it was always, and like you said, Bellator was the little brother. UFC was out front just kicking butt, and then there was the little brother picking up the scraps.
Right.
But I think maybe even outside of that, because you're right, I mean, Bellator certainly has done some amazing things, and while they still are second fiddle to what the UFC is doing, they've definitely improved their marketplace. But I think also, too, is just the fact of seeing so many fighters leave the UFC and say that they're happy going elsewhere. They're making good money. Now you got people leaving to go to one championship. You got people that are leaving and going and making careers in, PFL. You got the World Series. Well, we used to have the World Series. I mean, like, it's interesting. I think it used to be where it was, I just want to fight in the UFC. This is the only place I want to fight. The other leagues don't have anything. And you're not hearing that from the fighters anymore, at least to the point where they don't think there's anything else.
Right.
I mean, I think they're agreeing to the fact that there is money to be made elsewhere. And I think a lot of fighters they're kind of stopping themselves from saying stuff that maybe they'll regret later. And by a proxy, we're kind of taking it all in as well. And it's like, it's not a big deal now to see fighters leave because they've been saying it all the time, like, hey, I might go look elsewhere.
Demetrius
I
is
gotta
gone.
do whatever.
Sage is gone.
Like,
all
seeing
these
DJ leave, that's
crazy.
huge. I mean, that's huge. Sage, I kind of figured eventually would, because he's been kind of teetering on this little, I would never say mediocrity, because the UFC's still pumping him up, but he wasn't winning the fights that he needed to kind of keep going up. I mean, he was still winning, but it's just weird. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me anymore. But it doesn't feel, because it's happening all the time.
The UFC is still the dominant brand, and I don't see that changing for a while. I mean, it's still the leading organization, and they're just starting to kick off this ESPN deal, which is going to be great for them, no question. But I do feel like it's a really good time to be a fighter. I mean, as you said, you've got these options now. People are stepping out, making good money, and fighters are flexing a little bit. I mean, look at the fact that the UFC had to cancel another event, which is crazy. I didn't think there was any way they were going to do that. They had to cancel an event. Twice admitting defeat in Southern California. How about that Scott Coker text message? You see that, the little gif of the baby running in and then running back out.
I find that. Like, what words do you search in the Giphy search box?
That was a vicious
GIF search
man.
box to find it. Like, did he say, "Oh, where's that baby run and then run away"?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What did he type for that one?
But I tell you what, I mean, look, I think a big part of that is, like, for instance, like Tyron Woodley. I mean, I know Dana's going after Tyron, but Tyron's like, I'm not fighting in January. I'll be ready in March. It's like fighters are A, they have more options, and it seems like B, they're starting to recognize their own power to just say, like, dude, I don't have to just say yes to you. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it behooves you. I mean, when the UFC has favorites, they take care of you. I mean, they put money in your pocket, and they do give the right opportunities. But I think guys are starting to realize, like, listen, even if I'm fighting for the UFC, I don't have to just say yes to everything you offer me. It feels like, even though I still don't think unionization is any closer, I just think it's too hard to get everybody on the same page. I do feel like at least fighters are starting to realize, like, hey, I got a little power on my side too.
And there's the fact that there's money. Organizations are putting money, and I think it does seem like the stigma of going to another place because they're like, people won't think I'm that good. We've seen fighters come from all over these organizations. They're debuting in the UFC, and everybody's like, whoa, look at this guy, he's done so well. And I think a lot of people are like, well, where was he? Oh, he was King of the Cage, or oh, he was Cage Warriors. And they're like, well, okay, so if he was in this organization and he's good enough to make it, maybe these other organizations are good, so maybe I can go somewhere else. And it's not like, oh, hey, I'm a shitty fighter all of a sudden because I'm not the UFC. It's not. I don't think it's like that anymore. And the fact that now that these organizations are paying what these guys need, go for it. I mean, ultimately, you only have so many fights that you can have before either your body gives out or that you're just like, all right, I'm done enough. So if you have an opportunity to make money and it might be another organization, if it feels right to you, make the move.
That's it.
Nobody's going to care. Like, I personally, if I see a guy and he's like, I fight a King of the Cage, I'm happy, I'm making money, I'm supporting my family, I'm happy where. I don't care if I ever make it to the UFC. I'm not going to doubt him and say, you're full of shit. I think you're lying because I know ultimately you want to be there. But if he's happy, good for you, dude.
It's getting over that stigma, because I always say, and Dan, you spend a lot of time training and had fights, as was said as well. But I don't think there's anybody in the gym, that's lacing up the gloves, getting ready for practice, saying, one day I'm going to be a Bellator champion. You know, everybody's
Very
saying,
true, yeah.
I'm going to be a UFC champion.
We're picturing the walkout. You're picturing your walkout for the UFC for
Yeah,
a title
you're getting
fight.
in the octagon for the first time. You know, it's funny. Like, we don't ever think about this. We never ask somebody, did you get the circular cage jitters tonight in Bellator? You know, when you made your Bellator debut, it's always the did you get the octagon jitters in the UFC? So I mean, but I think breaking that stigma, like, realize, like you said, I mean, yes, if that's the dream you want to follow it, as you should. I'm not trying to take away from the UFC. It is still the preeminent organization. But if your goal is just to get paid, put money in the bank, make sure that you're set up,
just
don't be afraid to do it somewhere else.
I would love to take. I mean, like, Bellator has some fun walkouts. I'm sure maybe there's some fun regional ones. I would be interesting to ask some fighters, that have done both, like, which did you appreciate and why? I mean, was it just the sheer scale that the big arena of the UFC made it worthwhile? Because the Bellator, their walkouts are like, when we covered a couple of things.
With the screen
and
the promo videos.
They're by themselves and they're walking down that ramp. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, somebody might be like, hey, that's more my style. I kind of like this better. I mean, like, I mean, when you think about it, it's not a great walkout. I mean, it's cool because of the arena, but you're just walking from the inner bowels of the venue, walking through, and it's just awkward, and then you see it. Whereas at least, like, Bellator, you're getting some bells and whistles, cool ass screen, maybe some smoke, maybe some flames.
It is funny how crappy some of those back of those arenas look. Like, they're walking by, like, the employee dining hall, and then, like, the storage area.
I mean, at least some people like Bellator and some other ones are trying to put a little pizzazz. Like the UFC, there is no. I mean, when you look at them on the level, all they're doing is dimming down the fucking lights. They're putting up some music, and then they're having a different camera. They have a follow camera, and you have that one.
Right.
That's the level of what they're putting into the production of the walkout. It's the crowd, it's the arena that pumps it up.
Right.
That's free for the UFC. They're not putting a damn thing into it. But at least Bellator and some of these other ones, that screen that Bellator uses and those ones,
cool, man.
That is amazing. Every time I'm there and I see some of that cool shit in that thing slides up in the middle or does whatever, I'm just like, dude, that's badass.
See, I think the UFC purposely didn't do that for a long time because they wanted to make sure they didn't seem pro wrestling-esque. And there was a time in my life where I was like, yeah, we're not like pro wrestling. We need to let the world know we're not like pro wrestling. We're MMA. That's our sport. And so I kind of appreciated it. No, like, we walk in this way. But now, like, as I've gotten older and I've seen it, like, I do kind of like, the custom video package. Roy McDonald comes out and there's like some Canadian psycho stuff going on. Or whatever.
I guess I always kind of thought it because I thought they were like, we don't want to look like Pride. We don't want to do whatever.
I think it was,
but maybe
I think it was more trying to get away from pro wrestling. They wanted to make sure people realized, like, this is not, so they adopted what was more like boxing, which boxing has the more simplistic traditional.
I would go big on that walkout. I mean, like,
because with the UFC money that they have for production,
dude, they could do something cool. They could probably have like one of those, like, what is it when you see you'd see like Snoop or somebody, not Snoop, but like Tupac. What do you call them?
Oh, the holograms.
The holograms. I bet they can have like a hologram somewhere doing something cool.
Did you catch the speaking of the Coker, a little bit of snark there? Did you catch when I asked him about production, if he had anything special in mind planned? Yeah. And he really made it a point. You guys catch that to really say it's important for let these fighters build their brands.
True.
And he was almost voicing a lot of things that media pundits and fans themselves have been saying. It's almost like he's paying attention. That Coker.
It's true, man. Yeah. Let him show some personality. All right. Real quick, the welterweight Grand Prix.
Yes.
Ed Ruth, Dan Tom, I want to ask you because I am super high on Ed Ruth. Now, winning this would be hard. There's a lot of big names in there, but I'm really high on Ed Ruth. You've seen him so far. You've seen the development. Am I right to be that high on the guy, or am I getting am I getting a little ahead of myself?
You're not wrong to be high on him, but as far as winning the tournament, because that's the big picture, you almost forget with these fights. Perhaps that speaks to the scheduling, and again, not a negative. Bellator's doing a good job of stacking, so it's easy to forget these things. But yes, they are a part of a tournament. Now, I don't know if I'm ready to say he's going to be the Daniel Cormier of that tournament, though he has the skill set to do so. But I am with you, John. Everybody's really interested in watching to see this kid grow, which is the interesting part. Because opposite, we're interested in seeing Neiman Gracie grow, but I think in a different way, right? We want to see him break that mold. Of course, we respect all the Gracies and what they do and what they continue to do. Kenny was just sharing what Hoist was doing, and obviously
striking training.
Yeah, striking training. I mean,
his sidekick.
But I think we really want to see if Neiman can get out of the shell.
in 3 steps.
3 seconds. Yeah. Hey, maybe Neiman can bust out the sidekick. What if he wins? What's the prop on that? If Neiman wins by sidekick, guys.
He's like, dude, I've been drilling this with hoist. It's been amazing, man.
Like a Steven Seagal.
I was just gonna say, where does Steven Seagal come into the picture?
Yeah, listen, I am high on Ed Ruth, and listen, I do think maybe
You
this
are
is
so
too much
high
too soon.
right now.
I'm so high.
That's the 3rd time you've said you're so high on Ed Ruth.
I'm a fan of Ed Ruth. How about
There you
that?
go,
I
there you
believe
go.
he has
There you
talent.
go.
I do think it may be, a little bit too much too soon, but I do think he's the person to keep an eye on because I
Yeah.
think they're going to keep developing.
Yeah.
King Mo and Liam McGeary, big fights for both those guys. They both need wins. And then, as we said, the main card kicking off with Nainoa Dung and Kona Oliveira, 2 very young fighters who, if their fight is not good, keep an eye out in the crowd because their camps may be going at it and make it fun.
King Mo had to do some mediating himself
That
today.
was so fun to do, King Mo.
Yeah, but it was interesting because you could tell that there was history. Because remember, you had even said like there's some history sometime between the different Hawaiian camps. Because some of the words, it wasn't like you was just like saying like, "Oh, my dude's gonna kick your dude's ass." I heard one of them. He was like, "He gets too emotional. You're too emotional. He gets too emotional. His emotions take over." I'm just like, okay, this is somebody that's maybe like studied like his thing. Like I've seen his fights. He gets emotional. Blah blah. I was just like, that's not like a typical shit call. Like he's like. He gets emotional and he
Have you noticed
he drops
his
his guard. He drops his guard in the 3rd.
I think I heard real Hawaiian pride or real Hawaiian attitude or real Hawaiian stuff. I was like, oh crap, okay, now it's
The dude on the right was thick, man.
Yeah,
I
he
was
was.
like,
He
he
was-
put some loco mocos down, and then the other dude, I was like, he was probably. When I saw it playing out in my head, I was like, the dude on the left, he would be really, really moving in and out but that big guy grabs a hold of him and just slams him.
Because Kona's
then it's
actually the one
done.
that trains at Black House, right?
Yep.
He went to California.
Black House, yep.
He trains at Black House, so I guess that's where the real Hawaiian, because you left and you went to
exactly.
California,
Yeah,
whereas
yeah.
Nainoa is like born and raised on
Yep,
the island, and he's there. So it's going to be some heat. Keep an eye on that one. I know
was fun
that
to
probably
see. That
was
was
on many
fun to see
people's
him up there.
radar, but put it on.
It's on
It was
mine
fun
now.
to see, even when they walked out to take their seats. Did you see him like do the stare
Eyeballing
down
each
before
other.
Yes.
before they
Yeah,
sat down? I was
what?
like, oh shit, it's already starting.
Like, where's the security?
Yeah,
Where's
it
the
was like the
security?
very first people that walked down the stage. I was like, there's just lightning shooting between those
It's like
two.
someone's been watching the UFC super press conferences, huh?
Yeah.
Phenomenal stuff. Well, look, it should be a good weekend, but before that, I think Cole Coffey, who was anxious to be done, is ready to go get some dinner.
I want to go get some food.
All right.
That or another acai bowl. That was the bomb.
That was good, wasn't it?
I got the acai bowl extravaganza, and she's like, you could add peanut butter to that. She just looked at me and was like, this guy looks like he likes peanut butter. Because it was like on the thing below it. There was the item below it had like a bunch of shit and peanut butter. It was like the acai monkey or something. And it's funny because I have a friend back home that always called me monkey. But she was like, oh, the acai extravaganza. She's like, you can add peanut butter to it. And I was just like, oh, fuck yeah, add peanut butter. I'll take it. But then I was walking away. I was like, how the fuck she know I want some peanut butter? I was like, do I have that look that she's just like, this big boy, he liked peanut butter. He didn't get that way not getting peanut butter.
Oh my god!
But it was a delicious acai bowl, so I could fucking have like 3 more of those. Not the cheapest.
That's
but
like
it
that
was good.
Chappelle bit where he's like, he orders the chicken, and they're like, "Sir, as soon as you came in, we knew you were going to order the chicken. You know, we knew you were going to like the chicken." So
I guess I'm pegged for peanut butter.
That's your MO.
I think I'm gonna go get that in the morning again.
All right, well, let's go get dinner planned. Dan, Tom, I know you got more business to get
Yep.
to. I got more frosty beverages to drink, so we'll say to everybody else, thanks for listening.